The music pulsed low beneath the hum of laughter, soft jazz melting into the clink of crystal. Marcus Laurent stood near the glass railing of his 47th floor penthouse, a glass of vintage Krug in one hand and his other arm wrapped around the bare waist of a woman half his age. Sienna. Her laugh, high-pitched, performative, sliced through the room like the top note of a well-rehearsed piano piece. She leaned in and whispered something into his ear. He laughed loudly, a rich, self-assured sound that turned a few heads and made a photographer lift his camera. Flash. The moment was captured. Billionaire mogul in designer tuxedo, glowing skin, glittering skyline, and the woman on his arm, looking up at him like he was the only man in the world. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Marcus loved this part. The attention. The performance. The myth of the man who had it all and then some. He hadn't noticed the elevator ping. The doors slid open. A few guests turned their heads lazily, probably another investor or a late-model socialite. But then the room shifted. A hush fell, not sudden like a crash but slow, like the lights dimming before a tragedy on stage. Marcus turned lazily, still holding Sienna's hip, when he saw her. Delilah. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just stood there. In a matte black maternity gown that draped elegantly over her swelling belly, her hands resting calmly at her sides. Her hair was pinned back like she hadn't cared to impress anyone. But her eyes? God, her eyes were fire. For a long moment, no one moved. Sienna blinked. Marcus's smirk died on his face. Delilah took one step forward, the hem of her dress brushing the marble floor. Her breathing was even, but her posture was steel. A quiet strength radiated from her, one that didn't beg for attention but demanded acknowledgement. The cameras didn't flash now. Not yet. No one wanted to be first. Sienna stiffened under Marcus's touch and gently tried to step out of his grasp. He didn't stop her. His hand dropped to his side like dead weight. Delilah's voice when it came was low, almost gentle. I see the party started without the wife. A beat. Then, murmurs. Shifting feet. A whispered, "Is that her?" near the bar. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He hadn't seen her in 3 months. Not since their last court-ordered mediation. Not since she told him she was keeping the baby. Not since he accused her of doing it to trap him. Again. Delilah stepped further in, now fully in the light, the curve of her belly impossible to ignore. I didn't come to cause a scene, she said quietly, glancing at Sienna, but not really, seeing her. I came to remind you what real consequences look like, Marcus. Sienna's eyes darted between them. She stepped back completely now, pulling her shawl up over her shoulders like a girl realizing she was never really invited. Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he placed the champagne flute on the bar. He forced a smile, shallow and cracking at the edges. Delilah, he began, voice dry. This isn't the place. No, it's exactly the place, she interrupted. You built this world for applause. Let them see what it's built on. Flash. Someone took a picture. And just like that, the silence broke, not with sound but with tension, shifting energy, uneasy eyes, whispers growing louder. And Marcus. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control of the room. Delilah held his gaze for one last second, then smiled softly, the kind of smile you give to someone who has no idea what's coming next. Then she turned slowly and walked into the crowd, leaving a trail of whispered chaos behind her. And Marcus stood there, still, sweating under the collar, as his entire illusion began to crack. She remembered the weight of the pen, not the gold nib or the embossed initials on the legal pad beneath it, but the gravity in her fingers as she signed her name, once on the first page and again on the last. Delilah Quinn Laurent. Her signature, elegant but hesitant, sealed inside a contract that promised everything and meant nothing. Back then, the ballroom of the Laurent estate had felt like something out of a film. Tall arched windows pouring in winter sunlight. Ivory, marble floors reflecting her bare arms. She had worn a champagne-colored dress with frayed seams, the only thing she owned that resembled wealth. Marcus had arrived late, navy trench, no apology, with a lawyer who barely looked her in the eye. It wasn't a proposal, it was a transaction. He had offered it like a favor. 6 months, he said. You help me secure the board vote, with the family name. I help you pay off your sister's surgery, no strings. She hadn't wanted to say yes, but she was 25, broke and dancing 3 shifts a night in heels that made her bleed. Her sister's health had been failing, and Marcus, he'd seen her backstage once, told her she had the kind of elegance you couldn't fake. In the moment, it felt like rescue. In hindsight, it was branding. I don't believe in love, he had said, swirling scotch in his hand as they stood by the fireplace. But people do. They eat it up. They trust a man more if he has a woman standing next to him. And what do I get? She'd asked, folding her arms. He had looked at her, long and slow, and said, protection, visibility, power if you learn how to use it. The prenup was 27 pages. She hadn't read all of it, just the parts that mattered. No claims to assets, no children, no expectation of fidelity, not on his side at least. A clause about confidentiality, another about public appearances. He promised her a penthouse suite, a stipend, and a quiet exit once the year was over. And she signed. She told herself it was just paper, but paper has teeth. The first month had been easy. Marcus stayed gone most nights. She attended fundraisers, in gowns borrowed from stylists, and smiled for cameras with practiced charm. He would touch her waist in front of donors, whisper a joke, and walk away. It was a role, she told herself. A beautifully lit illusion. Then came Milan. A hotel room. A bottle of Barolo. Too many words exchanged over too many hours. He asked about her mother, her dreams, her real name. He told her about the pressure of legacy, how his father had loved money more than anyone. They fell asleep holding hands and woke up pretending it hadn't happened. But after that, it wasn't just a contract. It was something unspoken. A tension between the lines. They stopped pretending to hate each other. Sometimes they didn't pretend at all. By month 4, he stopped seeing other women, or at least stopped hiding it. He brought her coffee in the mornings. He bought her a piano, and once, when she fell asleep in the back of the town car, she woke up with his coat draped over her legs. She started to believe he might want more. So when she found the second draft of the prenup, the one his lawyer had tucked into a drawer, without telling her, her hands trembled. This version had new clauses. If she got pregnant, the contract was void. If she breached confidentiality, she'd owe damages. There was even a timeline, a countdown to annulment. She never confronted him. Not then. But that night, when he touched her thigh and whispered her name like it meant something, she looked him in the eye and lied. I love you too, because she had to believe it wasn't all performance. Because if it was, she had already lost. And now, standing in the echo of that penthouse party, watching his face crack as he saw her pregnant body, she wondered, had he ever loved her? At all? Or was she just the best branding he'd ever bought? The night after the party, the penthouse was quieter than usual. The music had faded, the champagne glasses gone, but the echo of Delilah's arrival still clung to the walls like smoke. Sienna sat on the edge of Marcus's bed, her silk robe slipping off one shoulder. She kept her legs crossed, arms folded tight, and eyes fixed on the skyline. He was in the shower, humming faintly as if nothing had happened. That infuriated her. She had watched Delilah walk in, heavily pregnant, unshaken, commanding the whole room, and she had felt something twist in her stomach. It wasn't just jealousy. It was fear. Marcus emerged in a cloud of steam, towel wrapped low around his waist. He smirked as though the night hadn't detonated their illusion. You're quiet, he said. Sienna's jaw clenched. You didn't tell me she was pregnant. He rubbed the towel across his chest, unbothered. You said she was out of the picture. That's what you told me, she snapped. You said she was gone, Marcus, that she signed her silence away, that she was a contract, not a wife. He met her eyes finally, something cold sparking there. She was a contract. Don't confuse paperwork with emotion. But Sienna didn't believe him. Not after the way he froze when Delilah appeared. Not after the way his voice cracked trying to dismiss her presence. There had been fear in him. Not the fear of a nuisance. The fear of a threat. Later, when he fell asleep beside her, Sienna slipped out of bed. The city was still awake outside, lights burning in the towers below. She padded into his office barefoot, her robe trailing like a whisper. She knew where. He kept his locked drawer. She had seen him place files inside when he thought she wasn't looking. It took her minutes to find the key, longer to summon the courage. Inside were stacks of paper, contracts, NDAs, investment portfolios. And, tucked between them, a thin manila folder with Delilah's name typed neatly on the tab. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Hospital letterhead. Medical forms. Fertility test results. Words she barely understood in clinical language. Endometriosis. High-risk pregnancy. Previous stillbirth. Her breath caught. She scanned faster, heart pounding, until she landed on a single handwritten note at the bottom of a page. Marcus's initials. Probability of live birth way minimal. No public disclosure. Sienna's throat tightened. So that was it. He had known. He had gambled on Delilah never carrying to term. He had promised Sienna security because he believed Delilah's body would never betray him. But now Delilah's swollen belly told a different story. The robe slipped off her shoulder as she dropped into Marcus's leather chair. She pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting the wave of nausea. If Delilah delivered that child, everything changed. Not just emotionally, legally. A living heir meant rights, shares, a permanent place in his empire that Sienna could never erase. Her thoughts raced. She had given Marcus 2 years of her life, the best of her youth, her reputation. She had believed him when he said she was more than a distraction. But sitting there, with Delilah's medical records trembling in her hands, Sienna realized what she really was. A placeholder. The bedroom door creaked. Marcus's voice floated down the hall, lazy, half asleep. Sienna, come back to bed. She shoved the papers back into the folder, heart hammering, and slid it into the drawer. Her hands shook as she turned the key. In a minute, she called, back, forcing calm into her tone. When she stood, her reflection caught in the glass wall of the office. Hair wild, eyes sharp, skin pale under the city's glow. She barely recognized herself. Delilah was not supposed to matter. Yet tonight, holding the proof of her fragility and her strength at once, Sienna understood something chilling. Delilah wasn't gone. She was rising, and if Marcus wouldn't see it, then Sienna would have to act first. Her fingers brushed her stomach unconsciously, not from pregnancy but from a fear she couldn't name, because suddenly she wasn't sure if she was the mistress fighting for survival, or just the next woman waiting to be discarded. The ultrasound paper was still warm in her hands. Delilah sat motionless in the back seat of the town car, her fingers gripping the edges like they could hold her together. The black and white image trembled slightly as the vehicle curved through the downtown streets, but her eyes never left it. A soft flutter in the upper right quadrant. That was the heart. It was still beating. For now, her OB's voice replayed in her mind like a distant echo from underwater. There's a partial placental abruption. It's not catastrophic yet, but it's serious. You need to minimize stress. Delilah, no more surprises, no more emotional trauma. Too late for that. She let her head rest back against the leather seat. Rain-painted streaks across the window, city lights blurring into long tiers of gold and white. She exhaled shakily, feeling the taut stretch of her belly beneath her coat. 7 months. Still 2 more to go. If her body held on. If the world didn't keep yanking at the seams of her sanity. The party had pushed something loose in her, not just the humiliation of seeing Marcus with another woman, not even the betrayal of how confident he had looked. It was the silence afterward. No calls, no texts, not even a message from his assistant, like she was the disruption, like she had invaded his space. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't want to answer, but she did. Delilah, came the clipped voice of her lawyer, Imani. I got the update from the clinic. Are you somewhere safe? Delilah nodded, then realized Imani couldn't see her. In the car. Good. Listen, we need to move. If the pregnancy is high risk, that strengthens our case for immediate financial protection. I don't want his money, Delilah whispered, but it rang hollow in her own ears. You don't get to play noble, Imani snapped. Not when you're carrying an heir to a multi-billion-dollar legacy. You think Marcus won't fight you for the optics, alone? We go quiet now and he will erase you from the narrative. You're still legally his wife, use it. Delilah pressed the paper against her chest. I don't know if I have the strength, she said, barely audible. You don't have to have it, Imani replied. You just have to look like you do. That's what he's always done, right? Silence. Then, Delilah ended the call. She stared out the window again, fingers tightening over the scan until the edges creased. The baby moved. A subtle shift, like a reminder that it was still here, still fighting, even when she wasn't sure she was. The car pulled up to the brownstone where she'd been staying. Nothing like the penthouse, but it was quiet, private, real. She stepped out slowly, one hand bracing her back, the other shielding the scan from the drizzle. Inside, she peeled off her coat and stared at the fireplace mantel. No family photos, no legacy paintings, just a single orchid in a clay pot. She sat on the floor, legs folded beneath her, and placed the ultrasound on the rug. It looked so small now, so fragile. She traced the outline of the fetus with her thumb. The doctor said she needed calm, needed to protect the baby from stress. But what did that mean in a world where Marcus existed? Could she fight him and still carry safely? Could she not fight and live with herself? Her hand slid to her stomach. Again, a protective gesture, or maybe a surrender. The knock on the door was sharp. 3 times. She flinched. No one knew she was here. No one except Imani. Another knock. She stood slowly, heart pounding. When she opened the door, she expected her lawyer. Instead, standing there in the rain was Leo, Marcus's assistant, and in his hand, a thick file folder with her name on it. Don't say anything yet, he said, glancing over his shoulder. Just let me in. You need to see this before it's too late. Delilah stared at him, her fingers hovering protectively over her belly, as her world tilted again. Delilah stepped back to let Leo inside, but her fingers stayed curled tightly around the doorknob. He entered cautiously, as if the air in the brownstone was heavier than the rain he'd just escaped. He looked different in civilian clothes, no suit, no earpiece, no polished leather shoes, just a dark hoodie, jeans, and guilt. She closed the door behind him. Silence stretched. Leo held the file close to his chest, both hands wrapped around it like he needed to feel its weight to remember why he came. I know I should have come sooner, he said quietly, but I didn't know everything until yesterday. Delilah didn't sit. She leaned against the wall near the kitchen, one hand resting instinctively over her stomach. The tension in her body was sharp and coiled, like she was waiting for another blow. Start talking, she said, voice thin but firm. Leo nodded once, then walked to the coffee table and slowly set the folder down. It was thick, worn at the edges. When she didn't move, he flipped it open himself. 3 years ago, Marcus asked me to vet a clinic in Switzerland. I didn't think much of it. Said it was for a family friend who needed privacy. Fertility treatments, specialized diagnostics. I arranged everything. Delilah didn't blink. Her eyes were locked on the top document, her own name stamped at the top of a medical form she had never seen. Then last year, Leo continued, he had me intercept results from your tests, the ones you did when you were trying to figure out why you couldn't carry full term. I delivered them directly. To him. Delilah's throat tightened. Leo swallowed hard. But the results you got, the ones that said you had less than a 10% chance of conception? That pregnancy was unlikely? He glanced at her belly. They weren't real. He switched them. Her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself against the wall. I confronted the lab rep last week. He was paid off. Cash. High six figures. The original results showed you were healthy. Your odds of conceiving weren't low. They were normal. Her stomach churned. That conversation with Marcus in the car months ago, his confidence, his dismissiveness, the way he looked almost relieved when she told him she was worried she couldn't get pregnant again. He had known. He had planned it. She stepped forward and picked up the papers with trembling hands. Testimony, wire transfers, confidential lab memos. It was all there. Dates, signatures, evidence of a decision made without her knowledge, a choice to keep her in the dark, to control her story, her body. Why? She whispered, voice cracking. Leo hesitated, then lowered himself to the edge of the couch. Because you were never supposed to last. You were supposed to be the placeholder wife. Beautiful, polished, camera ready, and then quietly gone. Her eyes stung. She blinked fast. I don't understand. If he didn't want me pregnant, why the show? The marriage? The illusion of a future? Leo looked at her carefully, then said something that made her blood freeze. Because the board loved you. You humanized him. You made him more presidential, a family man, a legacy builder. It helped close the Rothman acquisition. Delilah turned away, nausea clawing up her throat. Her breath came in shallow bursts. So when I did get pregnant, he panicked, Leo finished. Tried to convince Sienna it wouldn't last. Told the board you were unstable. Behind your back, he started laying groundwork for annulment. And then when the pregnancy stuck, he shifted the narrative. Said you tricked him. That it wasn't his. She pressed the papers to her chest like they could somehow stop the ache in her ribs. I should have burned this and walked away, Leo said softly. But I couldn't. Not after watching you walk into that party. Not after seeing the way you still stood tall. Delilah turned to him, her face blank but her eyes blazing. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing, he said. But you need to know what he's capable of. He doesn't love you. He just hates losing. She didn't respond. She walked over to the couch and sank down beside the folder. She stared at it in silence. Her hand dropped to her belly again, gentle and shaking. And for the first time, the question wasn't whether she should fight Marcus. It was how far she was willing to go, because love was never real. But revenge? Revenge had paperwork now. The bedroom had always been a performance. Marcus made sure of that. The curated lighting, the temperature set just below warm, the silk sheets that whispered status. But it was also the one place Delilah had convinced herself was theirs. The one place where the mask slipped. She was wrong. It was 2 months before the party. The house in the Hamptons. A quiet escape from paparazzi and press. Supposedly a weekend. To reconnect. Marcus had driven her out himself. Hand on her thigh the entire time, music low, phone off. He made love to her that night like it meant something. Slow, careful, unhurried. Like a man returning home. He touched her face when she closed her eyes. Kissed her forehead when she trembled. Told her to breathe. And in the quiet after, when her head rested against his chest, he whispered, We're not Dundee, not by a long shot. But 2 days later, she opened her phone and saw him, front row at a fashion gala in Milan, arm in arm with Sienna. The press called her the new flame, the young investor's muse. She told herself it was business, optics, posturing, until the pictures turned to video. Until she saw Marcus lean in and whisper something that made Sienna throw her head back in laughter. The same way Delilah had just days before. The same rhythm, the same game. She confronted him that night, cornering him in his penthouse office, her voice shaking more than her hands. You told me we weren't done, she said, holding the phone out with the video still playing. You said, I said we weren't, he interrupted smoothly. He didn't even look up from his tablet. You're sleeping with both of us. He finally met her eyes. Calm, almost amused. You're making assumptions, he said. That's what you do when you're emotional. She blinked. Emotional? You twist things, Delilah. You always have. You hear what you want. You feel too much. You create drama where there is none. Her breath caught. A quiet, invisible slap. You were in my bed, and maybe you should ask yourself why, he said, setting the tablet down with precision. Why I come back. Why I still answer your calls. Because Sienna, she doesn't call me at all hours, or storm into my office. She doesn't need constant reassurance. She knows her place. Her chest heaved, but she said nothing. He stood then, walked over to her slowly. His voice dropped, low and coaxing. You're different, Delilah. That's why it's always been you. She hated how badly she wanted to believe him. You're saying this while dating another woman? I'm saying, he said, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek, that you complicate things and I let you because I care. The manipulation was so elegant, so quiet. She didn't even feel it cutting into her until later. She went home that night and lay awake until sunrise. Her phone buzzed again and again. Headlines, photos, whispers from Fashion Week, all of them featuring Sienna. All of them reducing Delilah to a footnote in a story she used to star in. The next day, she collapsed in the shower, hot water pounding her skin, her knees giving out on the marble floor. She sat there, naked and sobbing, for nearly 40 minutes. And when she finally crawled out, shivering and silent, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't crying because he cheated. She was crying because she still wanted him. Because somewhere deep inside, she thought if she tried harder, loved better, stayed quieter, he might choose her again. And that was the worst betrayal of all. Not what Marcus did, but what she let herself believe. The cemetery sat on a quiet slope just outside the city, tucked between an abandoned chapel and a forgotten grove of weeping willows. It was the kind of place even time seemed to avoid. Delilah stood alone, wrapped in a long wool coat, her hands tucked beneath the folds and cradling her belly. The sky above was overcast, a dull silver that mirrored the cold marble headstones scattered across the grass like broken promises. She hadn't been here in over a year. Not since the anniversary, not since she tried to forget, but some pain refuses to stay buried. She walked slowly along the gravel path, careful with each step. Her shoes sank slightly into the wet soil. The wind caught the edge of her scarf and tugged it back, exposing her neck to the chill. And then, she saw it. Aidan Laurent, born still. April 4th, 2020. You were real. You were loved. The engraving was barely legible now, the letters softened by rain and time. She knelt carefully, easing herself down with one hand against the stone for balance. Her breath fogged in the air. I'm sorry I haven't been back, she whispered. It's just, I didn't know how to look at you and not feel like I failed. She ran her fingertips across the name, so small, so final. They never even let me say it out loud, Aidan. Your name. Your story. It was all erased before it ever began. Tears stung but didn't fall. She was too tired to cry. She glanced down at her swollen belly, gently resting both hands there. Your little brother, or sister, is already stronger than I ever imagined. But I needed to come here first. I needed to say this to you. The memories came sharp now. The nausea she had hidden, the doctor's appointments booked under aliases, the nights she cried into a pillow while Marcus slept beside her, unaware or pretending to be, and the day he found out. She had told him, in the back of a black SUV, hoping the glass between them and the driver would shield the truth from judgment. You're pregnant? He had asked, his tone flat. She nodded. 12 weeks. He stared out the window. You realize the Rothman deal closes in 6. I can't afford distractions, Delilah. I'm not a distraction. No, you're a risk. You understand. What happens if the press finds out now? I've got $3 billion on the line and a board with zero tolerance for instability. We need silence, you understand? She had nodded, though every part of her wanted to scream. So she stayed silent, hid the growing bump under oversized coats, avoided cameras, lied to friends, lied to herself, until the night the cramps came. The blood, the silence in the ultrasound room, and when she told Marcus what happened, he didn't even look up from his phone. I told you stress was dangerous, he muttered. Maybe next time, you'll listen. Now, sitting at their son's grave, Delilah whispered, "There won't be a next time, not with him." She rested a small white stone on top of the headstone, a tradition her grandmother had taught her. Leave something behind so they know you were here. As she stood, the baby shifted. A soft nudge, a pulse of life. "I don't know what comes next," she murmured. "But I swear to you, I won't let this child grow up wondering if they were a burden. They'll know the truth about you, about me, about him." She turned away, pulling her coat tighter, one hand still anchored protectively on her stomach. She walked back toward the car with a new stillness inside her. Not peace. Not yet. But purpose. And the next chapter waiting just beyond the silence. The storm outside was picking up again, steady sheets of rain tapping against the tall windows of Marcus's penthouse. Sienna wandered barefoot through the dimly lit study, her silk robe brushing the tops of her thighs, a glass of Pinot clutched loosely in one hand. Marcus was out for the evening. A meeting, he claimed. But Sienna had stopped believing his calendar. Weeks ago. She was restless. Every inch of this place had started to feel like a set. Curated, controlled. And yet, the study remained his only untouched corner. Dark wood paneling, scattered files, framed degrees, and one photo that hadn't been there before. It sat crooked on the edge of his desk. She noticed it only when she leaned over to grab her phone charger. The photo was simple. No frame with gilded edges, no designer polish. Just a plain silver. Stand holding a 4R6 of a little boy, maybe 4, sitting in a backyard sandbox, sunlight catching on his curls. She froze. The boy wasn't family, wasn't her nephew, and he certainly wasn't in any of Marcus's past. Except he was. Because when she flipped the photo over, she saw a name scribbled faintly on the back in feminine handwriting. Evan, summer 2020. The wine in her hand, tilted just slightly. A memory surfaced. Marcus disappearing to Zurich that summer, claiming it was a quiet retreat while his father was in the hospital. He had been unreachable for days. When he came back, he had bruises on his collarbone, and silence in his eyes. Sienna set the glass down and sat slowly in his leather chair. Her breath was shallow. She didn't call. She waited. When Marcus returned past midnight, loosening his tie and muttering something about market chaos, she was already there, legs crossed, photo frame in hand. He stopped in the doorway. Her eyes didn't move from his. "Who is he?" He blinked once, then looked away. "Put that down, Sienna. Who is he?" Marcus sighed, stepping in slowly. "I didn't want you to find that. That much is clear." He took the photo gently from her hand, looked at it for a beat too long. His shoulders sagged in a way she rarely saw. "He's mine." The words hit the air like a gunshot. "I was going to tell you," he said. "When?" Her voice cracked. "After you married me? Or after Delilah gave birth?" Marcus looked up, and for the first time in weeks, his mask dropped. "I didn't know at first. The nanny, her name's Claire. We were involved before I even met you. She disappeared. After the Rothman deal. No calls, no closure. Then last year she sends this photo, says the boy's mine." Sienna's mouth parted slightly, disbelief painting her features. "And you didn't ask for a test? You just believed her?" "She didn't ask for money," he said quietly. "Didn't ask for anything, just said he deserved to know who his father was someday." Sienna stood, arms trembling now. Do you even hear yourself? She hissed. You're playing legacy games with two women, and now there's a third. A child. Does Delilah know? He shook his head. No one does. Until now. A beat of silence. And then Sienna laughed. Hollow. Broken. You're not building a family, Marcus. You're building an empire of secrets. He stepped closer. Sienna. Don't. She backed away. Don't say my name like it still means anything. She brushed past him, heading toward the door. Her voice barely held together. I don't know what scares me more. The fact that you kept it from me, or the fact that you didn't even seem ashamed of it. Behind her, the photo sat quietly on the desk, and the little boy in the sandbox smiled at a world that hadn't yet failed him. The ballroom glowed with soft golds and opulent whites, the chandeliers sparkling like constellations above the elite of New York. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter floated like perfume, and the press buzzed near the velvet ropes, catching glimpses of politicians, billionaires, and their sculpted partners. At the center of it all stood Marcus Laurent, tailored in midnight black, hand resting on Sienna's lower back as if to signal possession. The Laurent Foundation's annual charity gala had never been bigger. The Vaux Rothman acquisition had closed. The whispers about his private life had been buried. For now. He stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat just as the spotlight settled on him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steady and full of practiced charm. Tonight is about legacy, about building something greater than ourselves. The crowd turned as the ballroom doors swung open. He didn't. But Sienna did. And then the entire room followed her line of sight. She walked in like a blade. Delilah, draped in crimson silk that clung to every curve, her 7-month bump unapologetically on display. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek knot, eyes lined in soft black, lips the color of dried blood. She didn't rush. She moved. The murmurs began instantly. Phones lifted, gasps. A few board members straightened in their seats. Marcus's voice faltered. Delilah walked down the center aisle without breaking eye contact. When she reached the front of the stage, she placed her clutch down gently on the edge of the platform. Then she climbed up. Security hesitated. No one moved. The air had thickened with confusion and something close to awe. Delilah, Marcus said through clenched teeth, stepping toward her. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, she said into the microphone. She turned toward the audience. Calm. Controlled. My name is Delilah Quinn Laurent. I am Marcus's legal wife. This, she placed a hand over her stomach, is his child, the one he told you didn't exist. The room erupted, cameras flashed, reporters surged forward. I was hidden for 2 years, paid off, manipulated, told I was infertile because Marcus didn't want a child to complicate a merger. Marcus reached for her arm. Delilah, she pulled away without looking at him. Don't touch me. Sienna stepped back slowly, her lips parting in disbelief. Board members shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another. Delilah continued. I have medical records, wire transfers, a statement from his assistant. Everything you need to see the truth. That this man, she turned toward Marcus, her voice shaking now, built an empire on lies, and used every woman in this room as a prop. Marcus laughed once, hollow. Are you really doing this here? She faced him fully, her hand still resting over the curve of her belly. You took everything from me, my name, my body, my trust. And still, I stood by you. But now you'll stand with me in front of everyone. A silence fell again. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document, the amended prenup. She held it up, facing the crowd. I filed for emergency relief this morning. I'm demanding a controlling share in the Laurent Foundation. On behalf of my unborn child. Marcus's face drained of color. The camera zoomed in. Delilah stepped back from the mic. Her breath came fast now, her shoulders trembling. Sienna turned and walked off stage. And Marcus? He stood frozen, the red wine soaking into his white shirt. Someone in the front row had spilled their glass during the chaos, as Delilah's words echoed in the cavernous room. Legacy, lies, lineage, and the woman he underestimated was now the storm he couldn't contain. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale, bruised light over the penthouse when Marcus's phone lit up. His head throbbed from the night before. Too much whiskey, too much press, too much fallout from a woman who was never supposed to matter after the contract expired. He sat shirtless on the leather couch, his tie from the gala still crumpled on the floor. The blood-red stain on his collar from spilled wine was a grotesque echo of Delilah's dress. The phone vibrated again. Walter Shaw, legal. He answered without a word. Walter's voice came in brisk, clipped. She filed. Marcus ran a hand over his face. What exactly? Divorce, emergency petition, and, this is where it gets interesting, a motion for partial control of Laurent Global Holdings under unborn heir protection. Marcus's spine straightened. She's claiming ownership? She's not asking, Walter said. She's invoking New York's equitable interest law on marital assets tied to dependent offspring. And she's not going after alimony or silence money. Marcus stood pacing. No settlement request? None. She's not asking to go away, Marcus. She's making sure she stays. He stared out the window, glass wall stretching over the skyline, but the view offered no calm, just reflections of a man losing control. Why would she do this? He muttered. Walter didn't answer. Marcus turned sharply. We gave her what she wanted, the penthouse, the staff, the foundation board seat. You gave her visibility. You made her play the perfect wife. Then you paraded Sienna in Milan, while she was still sleeping in your bed. A beat of silence. She has receipts, Marcus. Medical, financial, personal, and now a child. Legitimate, tied to your name, and a press storm behind her. Marcus clenched his jaw. We can spin it. I don't think she cares about spin anymore. He walked to the bar, poured water into a crystal tumbler with a shaking hand. How bad? Bad enough that if she goes public with what she's not asking for, the fake fertility records, the hush payments to the Swiss lab, the assistant's testimony, the board could vote you out. A long silence passed between them. Then Walter added lower this time. She's not trying to hurt you, Marcus. She's trying to outlive you, that's worse. Marcus sat slowly, the glass untouched in his hand. He'd built a world where every woman was replaceable, every scandal containable. But Delilah hadn't played her role. She hadn't bargained for peace. She hadn't even taken the payout. She wanted a seat at the table, not as his wife, as the mother of his legacy. And in that quiet, his fear wasn't legal. It wasn't financial. It was personal. Because for the first time in his life, someone walked away without needing him and still had the power to destroy everything. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. From Delilah. No words. Just a photo. An ultrasound image. Dated. Labeled. With one line in the text box beneath, he'll know exactly who I am, will you? Marcus dropped the phone, and the silence that followed felt louder than anything he'd ever heard. Rain dripped from the edges of black umbrellas, a slow and steady rhythm against the silence that blanketed the cemetery. Sienna Hart's funeral was closed to the press, but whispers found their way past the hedges and marble. No cameras, no statements. Just a scattering of carefully selected guests beneath gray skies. Industry names, foundation faces, and Marcus Laurent in the front row, head bowed but unreadable. Delilah stood toward the back, alone. She wore a long black coat, her belly softly defined beneath the fabric. A simple hat veiled her eyes. No one acknowledged her. No one dared. She wasn't listed among the mourners. She wasn't invited. But she came anyway, because this wasn't just grief. It was consequence. Sienna had been found 3 nights ago, in her suite at the Baccarat Hotel. Overdose. Official reports called it accidental. But the timing was too sharp. The gala. The scandal. The photo of the child Marcus had fathered with another woman. The storm that followed. Delilah remembered that girl's laugh. Empty. Practiced. She remembered the way Sienna gripped Marcus's arm like it gave her purpose. A woman building herself around a man who didn't think twice before shattering her. She didn't deserve what happened. No one did. A few rows ahead, Marcus stood as they lowered the casket. His jaw was tight, lips pressed thin. But Delilah noticed. His hands, trembling, barely clasped together. Not in sorrow, in fear. Because a dead woman leaves questions, and secrets buried with her don't always stay that way. After the priest finished speaking, mourners began to drift toward the cars, nodding to one another, whispering condolences no one meant. Delilah stayed. She waited until they were gone, until the air thinned and only the echo of falling rain remained. She stepped forward, the wet ground soft beneath her heels. The casket lay beneath a veil of flowers, white lilies, lavender roses, expensive, curated. She looked down, then whispered, "I know you loved him, even when it killed you." Her hand rested gently on her belly. "I don't know what part of this was an accident, and what wasn't, but I do know this. You won't be erased." A breeze swept through, lifting the edge of her coat. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence fold around her. When she opened them again, she saw him, Marcus, watching her from behind the oak near the path. No words, just that same unreadable expression. She didn't flinch, she didn't look away. She turned, slow and deliberate, and walked back toward the gate. Because whatever came next, the press, the board, the war over their child's name, it would come on her terms now. And Marcus had just buried the last person who protected his version of the story. The knock came just after midnight. Delilah was sitting on the edge of her bed, a hand resting on the swell of her stomach, when she heard it. A slow, deliberate knock that echoed once, then again. She didn't move right away. She watched the door like it might open on its own, her breath shallow, her heart already warning her before logic could catch up. She rose, barefoot, her robe brushing against the hardwood floor. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit by the low lamp in the corner. Everything around her, the photos still in boxes, the smell of chamomile tea, spoke of a new chapter still unfolding. But the past had found its way back. She opened the door. Marcus stood there, soaked from the rain, his jaw bruised and his eyes rimmed with red. His suit was wrinkled, his collar stained, not from blood but from something slower, more corrosive. Guilt. She didn't say a word. "I made a mistake," he said softly. Delilah leaned against the frame, arms crossed, just above her belly. Her silence was louder than any scream. Marcus stepped forward but didn't cross the threshold. He looked smaller now, deflated. "I lost everything. The board wants me out. Rothman's pulling support. Walter quit. They're calling me a liability." Her face didn't change. "I shouldn't have let you go." "You didn't let me go," she said, voice calm. "You pushed." He swallowed hard. His lips parted again as if to apologize, but even he seemed unsure where to begin. "I miss you, Delilah. I miss the quiet. I miss waking up and seeing you across the room. I didn't know what I had until..." The sound of a heel clicking against the hallway tiles interrupted him. Delilah tilted her head slightly. Marcus turned slowly as another figure emerged from the shadows. A tall woman, caramel-skinned, with soft waves falling over her shoulders and a very visible pregnancy beneath her beige trench coat. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Marcus stared at her, then back at Delilah, as if trying to calculate the damage in real time. "It's not what you think." Delilah let out the smallest breath and a laugh without joy. "You don't even know what I'm thinking." The woman shifted awkwardly, her arms wrapped around her midsection protectively. Her face showed no shame, only exhaustion. "How far along?" Delilah asked her, eyes sharp but not cruel. The woman answered quietly. 21 weeks. Marcus tried to speak again. She was before everything happened. Before Zurich. Before the gala. You didn't plan it? Delilah cut in. Or you didn't expect it? Like me. Like Evan. Like Sienna. He winced. "I made mistakes," he said. "But I want to fix things." Delilah stepped back, hand gently resting on the frame of the door. Her posture straightened. She was no longer the girl behind the contract. She was the woman who had survived the fine print. She looked at the woman behind him, then at Marcus. Her voice was quiet but unwavering. "You're not here for me. You're here because everything else collapsed. And you thought maybe I'd still be soft enough to catch you." A pause. "But I'm not soft anymore." If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word and tell us where you're watching from. He took a step forward, desperation cracking through the surface. "Please just..." She closed the door. One slow push. No slam. No scream. Just the quiet, deliberate sound of a woman reclaiming her boundary. On the other side, she leaned her forehead against the doorframe, her breath shaking, not from grief, not from rage, but from the finality of it all. Inside her, the baby moved, a flutter that felt almost like approval. She whispered into the stillness, "We choose different now." And the past, with all its silk sheets, blood contracts, and whispered betrayals, stayed on the other side.